guys, welcome to the Running the Race podcast. As we were recording this episode today, we realized that we were having some minor technical issues. So we simply wanted to make you guys aware there might be some times where the video cuts out or the audio gets a little unsynced. But we are really excited about this conversation that we had about self-control and would love for you guys to join us. So I hope that you guys enjoy the episode. Let's get to it. I feel like we have to start off our normal, typical way. So, hey!
If we don't, then it's not the real podcast.
It's true.
Hello.
How you doing?
Well, this is a long time coming again for us, Matthew.
This is. I feel like we do need to provide a little bit of an explanation as to how life has been over the past few months anyway. So, I will let you talk about the majority of that.
Well, I want to apologize. Well, I'm not going to apologize. In one aspect, I will. Sorry we haven't uploaded in a long time. That's what I'll apologize for. The other thing I want to apologize for is life just gets busy. So, sorry. Not really. But one thing that obviously that is, if you don't know, I guess kind of me and my family is we added, my wife gave birth to our third child in February, a month early than what was anticipated. But aside from all that story, we have a second daughter, and her name is Frankie, and she is now 3 months. So that has been my life for the past 3 months, is adjusting to life with 3 kids and that transition. And it's been fun. In the midst of that too is finishing a semester of school, and then catching up on ministry stuff that I took time off for. But anyway, that has been my life. So Matthew, I know you've had your share of life.
Yeah, we did not have a newborn, but in a lot of ways we had lots of things going on. I think at least one of our last episodes we were talking about focal point and our experience there. But right after my family got back from focal point, all of my girls got sick. After that, we had a few other complications, in a sense, that we don't necessarily have to get into all the details, but lots of late nights, and lots of
head scratching.
Lots of head scratching. And if you know, you know. But on top of all of that, as you said, I've been working on trying to complete my master's. So I had taken like a 3-year break after my first daughter had been born. And I've got 7 years to get the master's done. I started in 2020, got a year left. So I need to get that finished. But thankfully, since our last recording, I have completed one class. I have turned in all the assignments for at least one class. So now I'm working on assignments for another. And once I'm done with that, I've got 2 more and then I'm done. So I'm ready to be done because it is already taking up a decent chunk of my time. And I regret not being more thorough with continuing my work even while my daughter was born. But I wanted to be more of a present dad in a new world with a new baby than sit at my desk doing schoolwork. So,
I wish I had that wisdom. I should have taken the semester off, and I didn't. And I wish I did, but we got it done.
You did. Yep.
So.
Yep. So from that standpoint, good work. And now, all we have now is the summer, which never gets very busy.
Not busy at all.
I mean, not never. Like we have camps and area-wide youth events and other
No, I don't
things
know what that is.
that just continue on day after day after day, every day of the summer.
Yeah, nah,
But
that's not busy at all.
no.
We have zero.
Um,
Not another hiatus.
yeah, no. But yes, as Danley said, we do certainly want to apologize for not being more active in here. It is not because we haven't wanted to. He and I have had several conversations about, hey, can we record today? And then last minute we have car troubles, or last minute our kid gets sick again, or things just kind of get in the way. But we have certainly not left the podcast behind. We certainly want to continue running the race with all of you, and we thank you guys very much for joining us and for being patient with us as we experience the things of life.
I'll say this before we get into our conversation is we also had just a fun idea of doing a Disney centered podcast.
We did. We did.
And it just happened in our group chat where um, Thinking Magic Kingdom would have been a great title. We could still do it.
We still could.
But primarily it was we had to talk and say, well, we need to keep our other one going before we start another one.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk Disney on this one. I don't care.
We
I'm
we
fine with
could.
that.
We could. Running. I mean, if we sign ourselves up for a Run Disney, I feel like that would set very well.
Okay, 2029. Let's plan on it.
2029. I think we can make that happen.
Disneyland only.
I think that could work.
Yeah, we can do that. All right. Let's get into our conversation today. I know last time we finished talking about focal point, and if you did listen to that episode, I hope it was helpful. I hope it made you think about, well, what events can I attend? And if you didn't listen to that episode, I hope you go back and listen to it, or any of the other ones. I mean, find one that is fitting and helpful to you. I don't think you have to listen to every episode we talk about. If there's a topic you think that stands out to you, listen to it. It's whatever we think would be helpful to you is why we're doing this. But this one today, I'm kind of excited for. This has been weeks in the making, but life gets in the way, has prevented us from talking about this. And I'm going to begin by this quote, and it's kind of intriguing to me a little bit, but I had this in a book, and so this is coming from the book by Jacob Hudgens called House Rules, and his chapter, We Control Ourselves. And he begins it with this way. He says, self-control begins with liberation. So, Matthew, what is your first impressions with that quote? How do you internalize that, I guess? What comes to mind?
Self-control begins with liberation, you said?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Self-control is one of those things that is difficult to really define based off of the fact that we tend to define it using the same terms. Self-control is controlling yourself. But even that, I don't know if it doesn't necessarily gives a good idea of what self-control truly is, what it truly means. And so thinking about that quote, self-control begins with liberation. I mean, I think in some aspects that is carrying the idea that self-control is something that you have to free yourself from the things that can easily come in and control you if you're not careful. We think about, one primary example that we tend to think about when it comes to self-control is like addictions or things like that. Those things can easily control us if we allow them to. So having self-control is liberating yourself from those outside things that can come in and essentially rule over you, to where you are now free. You are now the one in control. You are now the one that gets to call the shots.
Yeah.
So
This podcast today is sponsored by Owala, by the way.
yes,
I feel like every episode I have a drink, and it's something different. But I think you're on the right track there. Is when we think about that statement, there's an implication of like a cycle that you need to be freed from, and in order to be freed from that is to then get a handle on what's happening in your life. Um, and so it's the cycle that you're being freed from, and so the ability to control oneself brings liberation from whatever it is. I mean, you said addiction. That was like the far end of the spectrum, what I was thinking about. But I kind of think about other things that people lack kind of self-control in. Well, I guess, what are some other things you think of?
I mean, in my mind, you've got emotions that are involved. Anger in particular, but I think that can go even beyond any sort of extreme emotion and whatnot, where that emotion seems to be what's really in control and the motivating factor of things. And of course, now I'm blanking. Now that you asked me the question,
this is also the podcast just to ask Matthew.
Ask Matthew questions that he is not prepared for.
He's also much smarter than me, so I like to do that.
No, not true.
I think of emotions too.
Mm-hmm.
Is what you said. I think of speech. I mean, just a little bit, and in our world today, is people have a lot to say, and the platforms that we have make it to where people, have any medium and any way to say those things.
Yeah.
And I also think about money too. We're a very consumer-driven world and society, and it can be pretty easy to lose self-control on that front, on those things. And so, kind of going with what you're referring to, I like how you posed it as regard to, it's hard to define, because it is. I think when we say self-control, it's one of those things where I know what it is, but I can't articulate it. I can't define it, but I know what it is. Right. But scripture, man, when you look at this topic, there's a lot scripture has to say about it. And I don't think it's talked about enough or emphasized enough. But there's some, I think, several passages that come to mind and consider when it comes to self-control. I mean, I'm sure I don't even really have to ask you where your mind first goes about this, but what's a passage that immediately comes to mind?
The fruit of the Spirit's not an apple.
Yeah, exactly.
The fruit of the Spirit's not an apple. No, Galatians 5 is probably the one that everybody goes to first.
Right. I mean, that's probably the first one, and we're not starting there, by the way. I actually want to start in Proverbs 25. So we're starting the OT this morning. But we will get to Galatians 5, and I think what Paul says in Galatians 5 is very, very important. Not only when he mentions the fruit of the Spirit, but before he even gets there, really applies kind of what this says. But you look at Proverbs 25. I mean, there's not much of a context to establish in Proverbs 25 because it's the book of Proverbs. It's more thematic than anything.
Yep.
But look at he kind of at least has this train of thought for the most part, at least Solomon in his writing, in Proverbs 25 and verses 15 through 17. where he says, "Through patience a ruler may be persuaded, and a gentle tongue breaks bone." I like these two in 16 and 17. "Have you found honey? Eat only what you need, so that you do not have it in excess and vomit it." So, I mean, even with verse 16 or verse 15, rather, I mean, the self control to have patience, someone may be persuaded, right? To be able to withhold whatever you're going to say, whatever you're going to do, that can persuade somebody.
Mm.
And a gentle tongue, the restraint of wanting to say what you think needs to be said, whatever you feel like should be said, having the control to say whatever that is gently, or to have a gentle tongue in general, that can break bone. I mean, that has a lot more weight to it.
Mm.
But I like, "Have you found honey?" I think of Winnie the Pooh. Eat only what you need, that you not have it in excess and vomit it.
Yeah.
So honey's a good thing. Pooh Bear eats a lot of honey, but so much honey isn't so good for Pooh Bear.
Mm.
You know, it can make you sick. If you just eat straight up honey, in one sitting, whatever amount that is, it's good for you. There's medicinal benefits to it.
Right.
Um, all the stuff tied to it. You eat too much, you're gonna get sick. Oh man, my favorite one's Proverbs 25:17 though. This one's humorous to me, but it carries weight too. It says, "Let your foot rarely be in your neighbor's house, or he will become weary of you and hate you."
Don't overstay your welcome.
Don't overstay your welcome. Um, I mean, this is that's a good verse, but yeah, it's "Don't overstay your welcome," because I don't know. Sometimes you have people in your house, and they kind of like, okay, it's 10:30.
Yeah.
And not that you don't want people in your home,
Sure.
but you just got to be mindful of, people have time, people have other things to do. I mean, you love the company, but you want to stay longer and chat with them. You got to go home.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so you have those passages talking about self control. Honey is good. Too much in excess will make you sick. Company in your neighbor's house, and visitation in your neighbor's house, whatever, is great, but too much of it, they're going to get tired of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's strong, and they'll hate you, right? um, but the point of that is self control is needed. And when we talk about at least this short section in Proverbs 25, and there's so much more that is mentioned within the book of Proverbs concerning this topic, it's very clear to see, even with our knowledge of Galatians 5:22-23, that self control is needed spiritually in our lives.
Mm.
So we're going to go back full circle in just a second, back to kind of that first statement uh, that was made, that quote, but a little bit more emphasis. So we go back to that, where self control begins with liberation. We talk spiritually now. What are we being liberated from now? I guess as Christians, what is the liberation from? With that idea in mind,
Mm.
self control begins with liberation. Impromptu, Matthew, go, unleash.
I mean, I feel like the easy, obvious answer is we're freed from sin. Um, the sin that was once in control over us, we now have control.
It's the correct answer. Yes.
um, just because I was doing a study of sin a while back, and I came to a couple conclusions through that study that I've tried to reinforce and tried to explain the best that I could. In the fact that we tend to give temptation way too much power. There are times where we're tempted and we simply say, well, I couldn't control it, right? I couldn't say
Yeah.
no. It was just too strong. Not true. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation has overtaken you except that is common to man.
Mhm.
And God provides a way of escape for every temptation. So
Yeah.
we blame the temptation of being too strong when in reality we just lacked the self-control that we needed to take it. Um, and that right there is big. When we start to recognize we have the ability to control our sin problem, doesn't mean that we are from day one moving forward never going to sin again, but
Mhm.
sin is not master over us if we have allowed ourselves to submit to Christ, right?
Yeah.
If we set him as the king over our life, and as we seek to follow after him to rule our life, then sin is no longer master over us. Which means sin no longer has control. Sin no longer dominates. We are given the I mean, in some ways, power and authority to control that sin. So I think going to the big picture, self control begins with liberation. We are liberated from the control of sin because we
Yeah.
take back the control.
Right. Yeah, I think you're correct. I think about John 8:34. So when Jesus says, "Truly, truly," or "Verily, verily," I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, where you have this idea where Jesus is even saying, "Look, without me," I mean, even says earlier in verse 24, "Unless you believe that I am He, you will die in your sins." And then 10 verses later, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin, who is practicing sin. Let's just clarify more of how John also uses that in First John. He who is practicing sin. I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's the same idea in John 8:34. Is you are enslaved basically to this idea or this commitment or this vicious cycle that you're trapped in of doing whatever you wanted to do, of unable to fill the void in your life,
Mm-hmm.
of finding temporary pleasure and having zero fulfillment. I mean, you name it when it comes to sin and how damaging sin is. But just as what you're saying, as well as we can often give temptation more power and say, well, see, I have zero control.
Mm-hmm.
You have control.
Yeah.
You don't have the power, I guess, within yourself to do it. That's through Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
um, he's the one that liberates you, but through him, you have that control to do that. You can stop
Right.
doing what you're doing. I think about it this way too. Um, just a little bit with maybe the fitness world. I stopped tracking my calories and stuff. I found that I can be very obsessive over it,
Mm-hmm.
and almost like it. I feel kind of trapped by it. But then what I stopped doing is I stopped tracking. I just started being mindful of how much I eat. And man, that's just liberating
Yeah.
to say, okay, I don't need to eat this entire meal. I'm going to start with half. And if that fills me up, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, at Disney, that's hard to do, uh, but I mean, in most places in life and stuff, you can have those parameters and just that awareness of control
Mm-hmm.
and just to know, okay, this is liberating because I have control. And a lot of the time, it's also applied in finances too.
Mm-hmm.
People say, well, see, you're restricted by a budget. I mean, and if you follow Dave Ramsey and stuff, it's like, no, the budget actually liberates you. You have control of what's happening and
Right.
what's going on, right?
Right.
And the same thing, it's by the blood of Jesus, we are now liberating from sin. The thing that oppressed us and kept us, subjected under its power, Jesus broke that free, gives us the spiritual capacity, the mental capacity to then take control over the sin problem.
Well,
Uh,
and just to add to that sum, kind of going back on what I was saying before, one of the other conclusions that I came to through that study that I did on sin was we give temptation and sin way too much power. We give Satan way too much power. We don't give ourselves enough.
yeah,
We play the damsel in distress in a lot of ways to say, oh, there's nothing that I can do. Someone needs to come and save me. When the reality of it is, through Christ, we are given everything that we need in order to face head on
mhm,
the sin and
yep,
temptation that we deal with, and to overcome it.
right,
The choice ultimately comes to, are we going to follow suit with that? It's interesting in Genesis 3, or not Genesis 3, Genesis 4, when God is talking with Cain, um, where he says, starting in verse 6, the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. God wouldn't say you must master it if he didn't have the ability to, right? I
right,
mean, that right there shows Cain had the ability to overcome this temptation and this sin that he's dealing with.
yep,
He chose to allow that temptation to plant itself and grow and conceive into sin by killing his brother. But right there, we're given a testament by God saying, you have the ability to master sin. It's a
yeah,
choice, but you can be free from the rule of sin if you take charge and take hold of it. Which is really where I think that a whole idea of self control becomes so pivotal, as you were saying, to our spiritual lives.
hmm,
Because we have to recognize the freedom that we receive when sin is no longer in control.
yeah. I think you're exactly right. Especially, I like the example of Genesis too. And what's interesting about um, Genesis 4:7, especially in his usage of the word desire there and
Mm.
its connection back to Genesis 3. I mean, I know it's a lot to kind of unpack, especially with the I'm not going to say curse because it's not a curse really to Eve, in my opinion.
Mm.
But when God says your desire will be for your husband in Genesis 3:16, um, it's this idea of this friction that's happening,
Mm.
or this battle of wills that's occurring. And so there's going to be a battle of will between Eve and the husband and
Mm.
Adam. I mean, hey, that happens in marriage.
Right.
It's a battle of wills that's happening. But on another side of the spectrum, it is a battle that everybody faces, between the battle of wills between God's will and my will.
Mm-hmm.
And having the control, self control over my will to then allow God's will to supersede my will.
Right.
Right. And I think that's abundantly important. I like how you brought that out um, in Genesis 4, because that is, I mean, even from the beginning, that was a very big issue that was needed to be that was taking a place, and that needed to be addressed. Um, and one that I don't think we really emphasize truly enough
Mm.
is that. But now let's go to a little bit of the New Testament now. Let's go to Galatians 5 and kind of see a little bit more of how this is coming together, in a sense of how really Paul uses this, and kind of really a lot of the book talks about is freedom and liberation
Mm-hmm.
in Christ. I mean, because of what the context of what's happening in the church of Galatia here, where you have at least Judaizing teachers, is what we would say, adding portions of the law of Moses to Christ and Christianity,
Mm.
um, which would then enslave them again, because the one true Jesus is the one that liberated from anything else.
Right.
And when we try to supplement or add anything to Jesus, you get a different Jesus. And that Jesus can't save you. That Jesus can't liberate you. It's the one true Jesus that we read about in Scripture, who died on the cross for us, and all that, that we know about him and the truth about him. But when you look at Galatians 5, let's read 22 through 23. And we can sing the song. I love that song, by the way. It's so great to see kids get so interested. They love it when you
Yep.
throw any kind of fruit into that song. They get so excited.
Fruit of
about
the
it.
Spirit's not a kiwi.
It's
Or
not
dragon,
a kiwi. I like
dragon
watermelon.
fruit. Oh, water. I
Dragon
don't know if I've
fruit.
heard watermelon before.
I did watermelon last year because for the summertime we start this thing called Watermelon Wednesdays.
Nice.
So we have watermelon after Wednesday night service.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
And so during VBS, it was on a Wednesday night, and we sang that song, and I said added watermelon. It tripped up the kids. I don't know if they liked it that much. I love it.
I love it.
But I'll read here in Galatians 5, 22 through 23. Let's just start there.
Mm-hmm.
It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So you have at least this, this one of the lists, we'll say, of Scripture, where we have these different attributes that are characterized and listed out for us. And it's very clear and abundant that one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And, oftentimes I think we emphasize a lot, obviously, of, well, I want more love in my life, I want more joy. We can almost kind of cherry pick, I've phrased that in class before, of if you could pick your favorite Christian attribute, what would it be? I think being people, well, we need more patience, we need more kindness, we need more goodness, faithfulness, and you name it. I don't know if self-control is going to be one of those that is mentioned.
Yeah, at least not the immediate responses. It's kind of one of those things where, as you go down the list, you ultimately come to self-control and be like, oh yeah, and that that would be good too. But you're right in the standpoint of I don't know how many people that's at the top of their list. I don't know if it's necessarily even at the top of my list if I were to be asked that question. And that's something that I need to recognize, because all of these fruit of the Spirit are vital, right? And thinking about the fruit of the Spirit itself, I'm not entirely sure kind of where you're headed with this, but the context that surrounds the fruit of the Spirit itself is essential for us to understand why he's now bringing up this list right here. Is that where you were planning to go?
That's where I'm going. You walk. Okay. You run with it. Go
okay. So, I mean,
you're heading there.
Ultimately, we go back and all the way back in chapter 16, verse 16 of Galatians 5. You've got Paul giving a command saying, I say, walk by the Spirit and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. So he sets up this contrast and this comparison between spirit and flesh that really he's been working on throughout the entire book, but it kind of comes to a head here in this moment where he's talking about walking by the Spirit, walking according to the flesh. And we hear that idea of walking, and I almost feel like we could take the word walk out and replace it with the word live, and we're still getting the same idea, right? To live by the Spirit, actively and continually in what it is that we are doing each and every day. So he then goes through and lists verse 17, the flesh sets its desire against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. They're in opposition to one another, so that you may do you may not do the things that you please. But if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now, the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, which I have forewarned you, just as I have forewarned you, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. And then you have the fruit of the Spirit there in 22 and 23. And ultimately, we kind of almost have bookends here, where you look at verse 25, where he says, if we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. So you've got 5:16, the command, walk by the Spirit. You got 5:25, let us walk by the Spirit. So this whole section is encouraging us to walk by the Spirit, to live under the authority of the Spirit. So what's the outcome of that? The interesting thing that my wife actually noted as she was preparing a series of lessons over Galatians 5 was Paul talks about the deeds of the flesh, the works of the flesh, whereas it is the fruit of the Spirit, and just the difference between those two. Now, I'm going to be the one that throws the impromptu question onto you. What would you say is the difference between the deeds of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit?
I immediately come to mind of what the cause is of either one. So I think about, or the source rather. Let me just think of that. I may be completely off track here, but that's immediately now I know now I know how you feel.
Ha!
Yeah, but mine aren't this hard.
True.
Yeah. That's kind of what at least thinking of a big contrast is, at least with the works of the flesh, where especially when he says they're in opposition to one another in verse 17, and he says, in order to keep you from doing whatever you want to do. So to me, a major contrast there, and what he's also painting this picture is, look at the differences of the source. This is what the source of the flesh does. Basically, there's more to it than that. Because of obviously, being a slave to sin and slave being your master, you're basically doing whatever you want. Look what look what the works are. Look what this produces. But then look at this other source. But the fruit of the Spirit, the result of the Spirit, the cause, the source of the Spirit, is everything in contrast to that.
Yeah.
Am I on to something?
No, I definitely think you are, and I don't pose that question as a way of saying there's one definite answer. I think your train of thought. I think your train of thought is totally on point there. It's where these things truly come from, and maybe to take it a step further. When you talk about the deeds of the flesh, those are things that have to be done in action, right? Like, you have to do something in order for idolatry, immorality, impurity, sensuality, all of these things to happen, right? You have to be engaged and involved in them. Whereas you think of fruit is a natural byproduct of growth. And so, posing the question of, well, why doesn't Paul talk about the deeds of the flesh versus the deeds of the Spirit? And I think the conclusion is, if we are truly walking by the Spirit, as he's encouraging us to do, if we are living our lives focused on the Spirit, then the love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control are all going to be a natural byproduct of those things. The Spirit is going to bear that fruit in us naturally, because we're focused on the things that we should. If we're focused on the things of the flesh, then that's what is going to result. That's what we're going to pour into. Whereas the fruit of the Spirit is going to grow and develop based off of as you were saying, the source that is the Spirit working in us.
Yeah, I quickly looked at, uh, how I guess the Greek word for works and deeds is ergon, and so it would be as if someone is causing that to happen. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm working to make this happen. But even within the illustration of the fruit of the spirit, it is, as you know, exactly what you're saying, a deed understood as if a natural fruit produced by a plant or a tree. So the product or an outcome of something is what it's referring to. And it's interesting to me is what's cool to me is you went further. Yeah, I was going to start further back in Galatians 5,
Mm.
but I like how you started with the kind of the bookends, as you said, or inclusio, if we're going to be fancy with it.
Oh.
Yeah. In verse 16, and then you can make the connection with verse 25 at the end. I also like verse 13. I think verse 13 really, he gives the reason, right? Uh, Especially talking about circumcision and things like that. And he says, "For you, or because you were called to freedom, brethren, only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another through love." And so, how this is ingrained in my spiritual life as well is Jesus has set me free.
Mm-hmm.
I'm liberated from sin. Now, because I have this liberation, because I'm set free, that does not give me the right or the ability, truly, uh, or the, let's just say, the permission
Mm-hmm.
to go and live with the way I want to again.
Right.
It is then referring to again, um, this idea of not dabbling or practicing in sin. That requires self-control, and it is by living by the Spirit to where then we're going to see this natural outflow, this natural fruit that is going to be produced, rather than me actively working and showing, hey, this is what I'm working towards.
Mm-hmm.
I see it, even then with the illustration, it's way more burdensome that's being painted, because ergon, I think of slave, you're laboring intensely for it.
Yeah.
But a tree doesn't have to work. I mean,
It
to,
just
to
produces
produce
the fruit.
fruit, it just produces fruit in its growth, and so on. But the one who's really actively working the most, if we're going, let's just take this illustration a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, okay, if you will, is God is the one that's tilling and watering and doing all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to allow him to do that. We're going to get the fruits
Right.
that we want, and the fruits of the spirit. Um, Man, that's a pretty amazing text, that you brought out too. So we're on the same wavelength there, um, in regard to that.
Well, it
Now we
just
kind
kind
of
of
think,
just one more
go,
one more
go
thing,
for it,
just
go,
real
go for it.
real quick
Yeah,
as we go through.
yeah,
In
go for
some
it, go
ways, I
for it.
think we might be starting to beat a dead horse here, but just thinking about the fruit of the spirit. We can kind of approach these verses one in their isolation, just looking at 22 and 23, and almost look at these as a set of check boxes of,
Yeah,
okay, I have love, well, now I need to work on having more joy or having more peace or having more self-control or whatnot, when really these are all meant to be things that are manifested in us as we are walking by the Spirit. Like that
yeah,
that is really the emphasis point that I think we ought to spend more time focusing on. Not so much asking the question, well, do you have love? Do you have joy? Do you have peace?
mhm,
Going through this list, but ultimately, are you walking by the Spirit? And the
right,
sign of whether or not you are walking by the Spirit is by whether or not you have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control in your life. I mean, that is the outcome of you walking the way that God is calling you to walk, walking by the Spirit, living by the Spirit. Um, we can look at this list as a set of, okay, these are all the things that I have to have, when really it's more a focus on these are the things that are going to be in your life if you are walking the way that God is calling you to walk.
Yeah. I've had it phrased this way that when we look at the attributes, and we'll get there especially too in Second Peter 1, add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
self-control, to self-control, perseverance, brotherly kindness, and all that list. There another list that we have.
Woo.
Um, I think it was Wayne Jones that when we were going through Second Peter in Southwest, he mentioned that that kind of problem where we see, well, I need to add faith and then virtue and then all that, and he said it's actually more of the idea of like train cars being pulled together.
Mm.
Like we're not adding to the train here. They're all working together, being pulled together in harmony at the same time in
Mm-hmm.
unison together. Um, and I think we see that word add and say, well, see, I have to add at one plus two and then plus three, to then get to the result here. It's like, no, they're all working in harmony together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we're walking by the Spirit and living by the Spirit. And it's because we're pushing away things of this world that we would want to do. And sometimes we would rather do.
Right.
But because of self control and discipline that Jesus has given us, that God has given us. I think of 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given us a spirit of timidity,
Mm-hmm.
but of one of power and love and of sound mind, of self control and discipline. He imparts that focus that lets us push these things back.
Yeah.
And I think about this a lot with, kind of, I guess, our lives. And real quick, but, while we kind of have a little bit more time to talk about it, is what are some things that come to mind for you that to help cultivate. I'm thinking more about the home, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in a sense, but just in general, what are some things that help cultivate self control that you think of? Um, how can we help improve that rather than just saying, okay, Christians, let's be more
Let's
self controlling.
right. Yeah, trying to get some specific here.
Yeah, and if
Uh,
you don't know, that's okay. Um,
I would
I,
say
I,
at least one of the first things that come to my mind is you, and you referring really to all of us. We have to
to y'all.
know what our limits are, um,
Mhm.
and know where and when that self control is really going to be needed, because that is
Yeah,
going to be different for everyone, even in our own households.
yeah,
I going back to the food illustration that you were kind of using before. I know when I need to stop eating, right? I can get a gauge in my stomach of okay, I've hit my cap. I should not eat anymore. My daughters don't know that. My daughters will eat until they, puke, because they just love to eat. You put cereal in front of them, they're gonna eat it, eat it, eat it. You put candy in front of them, they're gonna eat it, eat it, eat it until it's all gone because they don't know, right? So thinking about the home, thinking about the idea of self control, we have to look at ourselves and understand our limits, and understand where boundaries should be put in place to help us in that self control,
yeah,
and being willing to talk about that
yeah.
with each other,
Right.
having conversations with our spouses about okay, here's where I'm at right now. These are the things that are going on. Here's what I'm thinking about how I can set things in place to make sure that I remain where I need to be. Um, is a valuable aspect because that also can provide some accountability.
Mhm.
Now you have outside individuals who can also be paying attention to the situation at hand and understand where your limits are and aid in helping those limits not be pushed over the breaking point.
Right. I think you're bringing out some really good examples, and I think limitations are good discussions that we don't, again, we don't have enough conversation about them. I mean, I think with kids, limits are the biggest lesson that need to be emphasized a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because my kids will, you mean, they'll watch TV all day if I
Mm-hmm.
let them, right? Oliver, my 7-year old, he'll play his Nintendo Switch all day if I let him, right? Um, but it's because of limits to say, well, no, it goes back to, I think, Proverbs 25:16. You know, eat what you have with honey, not in excess, because you're going to get sick. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to vomit it out. Those things that we have in life are good, right?
Right.
But too much of a good thing is harmful for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you think about also, there's this negative connotation to limitations again, too. Like, you think about, let's just think about money. We kind of brought it up. People that frowned upon having a budget, but that limit is there to help you and assist you to make sure you don't splurge or
Right.
spend more than you make and all this stuff. And I just think we also forget the reality that we are simply bound by limits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we are limited creatures, and there's only one who's limitless that we need to give ourselves to, because we're bound by limits. But even in
Right.
the midst of those limits, it's not a bad thing. Um, Paul David Tripp, in his book Lead, this is more about kind of ministry leadership and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I don't know if you've read it. I don't know if
I've
you
not.
have it.
No, I've not.
You need to. It's great. It's one of my favorites. But he has a chapter dedicated to limits, and I wrote this down. He says this. He offers several limits. Is that we're limited. We have limited gifts. So basically, you're not supposed to be able to do everything or know how. We have limited time. We're beings that are bound by time, unlike God. We have limited energy. We all get tired and exhausted and need time for rest. We also have limited maturity. So he makes the case that we all have weaknesses and will always, in some way, shape, or form. And that is why we need to constantly undergo discipleship. So basically saying that there's no cap, there's no limitation to um, that. I mean, there's never going to be a point where we never struggle in anything in our
Mm-hmm.
spiritual walk. There's limited maturity, that we're always going to be dealing with something, always going to be struggling with something, um, and so on. But in addition to this, I mean, teaching limits in the home is very helpful. But I'm just going to say this, as dads, is we need to kind of be on the forefront of this,
Mm-hmm.
and to be good leaders, and shape that in a sense of, I mean, a limit that you need to have in your life is something that you think you're susceptible to losing control in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that can be your emotions, that can be your speech, that can be, you fill in the blank. I have one more quote, and I've been waiting for this too. It's from the Stormlight Archive. It's this fantasy book, but Brandon Sanderson has very lots of religious themes, and you know and stuff in there. But he says, this is one of the characters that says this, and I highlighted it in my Kindle. But he says this. It's basically, one character is like, well, why don't you just lash out and do whatever you want, type thing, like they're like in the military. And he says this: a man's emotions are what define him, and control is the hallmark of true strength. To lack feeling is to be dead, but to act on every feeling is to be a child.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's refuting this idea of limits are a bad thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to act on every emotion. We're supposed to spend money however we want to. We're supposed to overindulge in whatever we find ourselves doing. But no, limits and controlling the self is demonstrating true strength, and it's the hallmark of true strength. And I kind of always remember that. And what's interesting is this character is giving him flack because he's kind of upholding ancient ideals, in this book of code for kings and stuff. Which, I mean, you find how people criticize Christians for following an ancient book,
Right.
and all that. But man, I mean, that's very, very abundant in our life too.
You know,
Part of that.
this whole thought about, limits is kind of making me think about the fact that sometimes understanding a limit is understanding what you are truly capable of and
Mm,
holding that back. It
mm,
is exercising that self-control in
yeah,
in making sure that you don't go to a point where you technically can reach, but it's not going to be wise to do so.
yeah,
I'm not one that's nearly as big into fitness as you are, but I think what I'm about to say you certainly understand, and if anybody's listening that's big into fitness, you also understand. I can walk into a gym right now, walk over to the weight rack, and start lifting weights. I have that
yeah,
capability, and I can go in and I can start lifting weights that I probably shouldn't be lifting because my
yeah,
body is not trained, my body is not ready to lift that amount. But I have that capability. I can go in and I can start walking around with, 50 to 60-pound dumbbells and ultimately do whatever I want to do for that day. But tomorrow, I'm going to feel it because it's
yeah.
done a lot more
Right,
damage than it has good, right? I
right,
I have the capability, but just having the capability does not mean that I should do that thing.
right.
And
Yep.
that's the other aspect of the limits that I just wanted to briefly bring out is recognizing there are times where self-control is recognizing I have the ability to do this thing,
Yep.
but I'm not going to because of what it can do. And that's hard because that's in some ways removing ourselves from the freedom. It kind of going back to the main quote, we think about we're in charge. We have this ability to tell ourselves, no, I'm not going to do that,
Hmm.
is almost counterintuitive because we want to boost
Right.
ourselves up. We want to tell ourselves, no, you can do this. You can accomplish whatever it is that you're setting out to accomplish. And that may be true.
Yeah.
But is it wise? Is it healthy for you to do that thing? Or is it going to cause more damage than it is ultimately going to cause good?
Sorry, our group chat is trying to FaceTime right now, and it's ruining the stuff. Um, we'll give the guys a hard time.
We will.
I think exactly what you're saying, especially holding back because of what it can do, but also on the for the positive side of that, it's holding back because of how great the reward is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, right, like right now, my training is probably more self control than anything right now. I just kind of thought about that just now as you're kind of mentioning that with that example. But right now with my running, I'm not running at the full speed that I know I can. Like
Mm.
I'm running purposely slow to build the base that I have, and so that I can run faster later on. It's terrible. It sucks, because I can run faster. I know I can,
Mm-hmm.
but the reward is going to be greater. And I think that idea, this correlation between self control and eternity, is so great. It makes so much sense. I mean, when we think about it and talk about it, it's not just saying no because I'm know how bad things are going to be out today. If I do, I mean, if I lash out and at my family in the mornings and whatever, whatever it is, because I don't have that control, but it's to show, hey, the reward is going to be great
Mm.
for I actually when I do control myself. I think about a soft answer turns away wrath in Proverbs 15:1. That reward is great
Mm-hmm.
because I'm having that self control. You think about we say no to things now in this life because we anticipate such a great reward in the next life too. I can't remember, was it Chloe that just told me this, or maybe I think she found it in a reel or something. But she said she found this guy. I guess he was preaching. He was talking about sex before marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and he said the reason we don't, just as Christians, we teach not having sex before marriage is not because just simply the Bible says, um, it teaches in the creation account and so on, but it's because we have self control so that we can have self control with one spouse the rest of our lives.
Mm.
Like that's why we have abstinence before marriage. And I was like, that makes so much sense spiritually too.
Yeah.
We have self control now, so then we have this great reward like we do, with our spouse in a godly marriage, and we're going to have that also. I mean, that it's kind of not a one-to-one,
Mm-hmm.
example, but you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
That is exercising self-control. We are illustrating this desire for a greater reward later
Mm-hmm.
on. um, that's all I got, Matthew. If you got anything else to add with this conversation, I know we can, like you said earlier, beat a dead horse with this, but um, man, I've been excited to talk about this.
Yeah. No, I thought we've had a great discussion, and certainly there's more that we could talk about, but I think at least for the time being, I think we've hit on everything that we need to.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. But as always, this is gonna be our conclusion of the episode. If there's anything we can do for you, if we can pray for you, or maybe there's a topic that you'd be interested in us tackling, you can message us on Facebook. I'm sure we'll get an email set up soon, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a delight and joy to be able to do this. And so I hope that is helpful for you as you listen. And we have to say it, keep running the race. So,
Yep.
uh, but we're signing off. We hope you have a good journey and continue to grow in your faith with the Lord.
We'll see you guys next time.